Previously on the Game On podcast.
Fascinating topic.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
With obviously most of your male, actually all of your male donations that have come in, they've obviously come in from some elder players. Unfortunately, obviously in this case, Heather was only 28 years of age, which is just amazing that could happen to someone so young. But from a study point of view, having somebody who has donated their brain at the age of 28, does that give you even more insight into what needs to change?
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, it's a big difference, isn't it? I mean, it's such a loss of a life at 28 years old. It's so sad, but very important in terms of a research perspective. And also that link, I suppose, if we're thinking about most of these deaths are sort of by suicide. And so looking at that link between concussion and mental health, and CTE and mental health, obviously. And we know there is a relationship, but again, it's getting enough resources into researching exactly why that's related and why that happens.
Sportscast SA presents Game On. Game On. South Australians' destination for everything sports. Local, national, and international sports. AFL football, soccer, basketball, golf, baseball, tennis, cricket, and any other sports played in this wide world. And we're going to have a blast doing it. So sit back, relax, and let's do this thing. Welcome to Game On.
Welcome to Game On. My name's Pete. Once again, joined by Malcolm, and Millie was fantastic last week, just giving us a bit more insight into the CTE and Heather's, unfortunate death is sort of also going to help other people going forward.
It's educational, and I think we've all got a responsibility in that regard. And you try and get hold of experts in the field and keep, educating ourselves and hopefully our listeners. So,
we found it fascinating that obviously they're trying some different things, and exploring other avenues that this may not be something that can be diagnosed after death, and they're working bloody hard. Yeah. From what I've seen behind the scenes on trying to find something to help players out now, here and now.
Things are happening every day.
Absolutely.
Around the grounds.
All right, today, mates, we're going to have a look at the fourth test. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the AFL trade talk. We're going to have Mary Cavey on to talk about the World Cup. Yep. We're also going to have Craig Martin on to talk about the British Open golf and some things that are happening around golf in South Australia. So we've got a pretty big episode ahead, so let's get into it with the AFL. Round 18, Sydney just beating the Bulldogs.
Yeah, there were some cliffhanger finishes. Western Bulldogs should have won that game. They certainly had enough of the ball and just butchered it inside 50 and that. And then the following night, the comeback from nowhere where Brisbane just played dumb footy in the last 10 minutes or so.
Yep. Where
it was okay to try and play, let's get men behind the ball and be defensive. But when Brisbane did get hold of the ball, they didn't slow it down enough. So it was a bit of both.
That catch-22, yeah.
Where's the coaching? Where's our set play where we're in this situation, where we're in that situation? And for me, it smacked a bit of just panic and not really sure what we do here. And
I think that's probably where Collingwood have been so good in training some of those scenarios. And you can certainly see that if you do train those scenarios, they're reaping the rewards for it now. Some other teams haven't quite done that, or maybe they do it, but there wasn't so much a game awareness. But you've got a guy standing up on the sidelines, holding up a placard. Exactly right.
And Norwood in terms of under Bassett, our last couple of minutes, if where we were, was research, and then the players knew exactly where the ball was meant to go every kick. Where for mine, Brisbane last week, it was just hurry, curry, and not sure what's going on. So, that was a big cross mark against Chris Fagan and Brisbane personally last week. When you're just watching as a neutral, not really minding either way. Had tipped Brisbane, but that didn't really care. And just thinking, it was just poor. So,
well, I mean, with 4 minutes to go, you really would think that they'd lock it down. And to Melbourne's credit, they did the job. But, Sydney, really showed some grit against the Bulldogs there to get up by a couple of points as well. So 2 very, very good matches to start round 18. And then we head over to the MCG, and Collingwood did what they needed to do against Fremantle. Again, Jekyll and Hyde of Fremantle, you're not sure who's going to turn up. We sort of now know who's going to turn up for Collingwood, and they continually do it time and time again, and richly deserved top spot at the moment.
And as you said, in terms of their set plays, I still think the Essendon game last year, where Essendon Cox misses, hits the post, they've got under 30 seconds, and their kickoff was so precise.
Yes.
Okay, it had to absolutely nail it, but they knew exactly what they were doing to get it in Elliott's hands to kick the goal after the siren. So,
I think the classic example from an Adelaide or a South Australian point of view is when Collingwood played the Crows here in South Australia at Adelaide Oval. In the still side bottom, would have loved to have kicked the goal, but he was happy with the point, so that way the ball didn't end up back in the centre of the ground where the Crows may have had an easier chance of scoring a goal. So, some very high IQ football being played at the moment.
Yeah, and isn't that a faux pas, Collingwood being on top in that regard?
Absolutely. The Suns defeating St Kilda. Now, this was the response that we sort of thought was going to happen after Stuart Dew.
Only a little bit in that. I actually think
Suns are going all right.
Yeah, I think Gold Coast were the logical favourite, whether Dew was coach or not up there. I think they were going to win that win. St Kilda have lost 4 of their last 5, and their only win was against West Coast by 8 points. So they're not exactly running on full cylinders.
Yep, absolutely.
So I thought Gold Coast was a pretty good tip anyway.
Yep. Carlton defeating Port Adelaide. I mean, Port resting 7 or 8 players, or managing. It was always going to be a bit of a tough ask.
I admit I went for Carlton in that way in the end because of that. But they were just really
run off their feet almost, which is a little bit of a concern.
I think it does show that they do rely still a lot on Butters in that way, and he's the spark with Rosie.
Mm-hmm.
And then Horne-Francis not there. So they only had 1/3 of their Batman, Robin and Accomplice act.
Yes.
And did fall away. Look, I'm a massive Tom Jonas fan. We all know we're Nord people.
Yep.
But his body's gone.
Yep.
I'm sorry. He...
Just not quite up to the standard, which is fair enough. I mean, every player, it doesn't matter when you start and when you finish, you're always told the same thing, that, you're not able to play because your body is failing. You might, in your mind, be ready to still play, but if the body's starting to fail you, then we've got some problems, haven't we?
And I'm sorry, when Nord played Port at Nord, and I actually
you made mention,
went up the steps quicker than Tom, I thought, geez, that is a worry.
Yeah, absolutely. Geelong defeating Essendon down at Kardinia Park.
And it was interesting where Geelong had their players behind the ball, owning the middle corridor, forcing Essendon out wide. And I thought, that's interesting, because it was certainly nothing Adelaide attempted the week before. So a big tick to Chris Scott and a big cross to Matthew Nicks in that way.
Yep.
And Geelong just way too good. Okay, it was at Kardinia Park and all that. But they'd done their...
Well, they've done their homework, but you expect that from a premiership side, don't you?
A win for the coaching box, well and truly.
Yep. And Adelaide being defeated by the GWS Giants.
GWS just seemed to have the wood on them. Very similar to round 1, came from behind. I thought here, and when Tom Green was out, Callan had pulled out, thought, geez, Adelaide should win here. But to fall away from that situation was pretty disappointing. Yes, they probably didn't get the rub of the green with umpiring, but you're 3 goals up at three-quarter time at home.
Yep.
And in Sloane's 250th, you thought they would have hung on. That's pretty average.
That is pretty average, I agree. Frustrating, I think, from a lot of Crows' point of view, but we'll talk about this after we finish these remaining games of where Adelaide and Port Adelaide are really at. But Hawthorn defeating North Melbourne.
Yeah, so North Melbourne, so they won their first 2 and have now lost every game since. Look, North Melbourne and West Coast, they could play a nil or draw in terms they're both really poor.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty disappointing.
And Richmond, obviously, as you said, defeating West Coast Eagles. Richmond are going along all right. They might just sneak in. That's the scary part about all of this, is that Hardwick's departed.
Yeah,
they haven't had the greatest year, and yet they're still sort of sniffing around that top 8, aren't they?
Probably shows that maybe that, you could still argue that 8 rewards mediocrity. You could say, I think Carlton are the ones who are coming more. They've won their last 4 by over 50 points.
Yep.
I think they're the ones.
While you're talking about that, there is a little bit of talk, and we've talked about it on our podcast here a few times in some of our really early podcasts about the wild card. It seems to have reared its ugly head again, but it's starting to gain a bit of momentum where in some pundits are saying, oh, you're rewarding mediocrity, and then other pundits are saying, well, no, what it is creating a little bit more excitement. I mean, where do you stand on it? That's really what it gets down to.
I think it's still rewarding mediocrity. As we know, the AFL, though, they want to be front and centre of publicity in the paper 366 days of the year. They want the leap year included.
Yep.
So would it get interest on that spare weekend? Yes, it would, but should they actually give a weekend to other states and other competitions? Yeah, you can argue on that.
I think what it gets down to is it's a business. It's not a sport. It's a business.
It's a multi-billion-dollar business.
And they're trying to maximise their content, whether it be through adding an additional round or an additional finals game.
It's an additional finals game of which, let's be honest, they believe that'll add to their value and add to their potential bidding dollar for the next contract. So... yeah.
So where do clubs stand on this? I mean, one club's going to go, we want the momentum going into finals as much as possible. We don't want a week off. We want to continue playing. And then others would go, I'd love a week off just to get them fresh.
I think the AFL will make their own decision on that one.
Fair call. All right, we go back to Adelaide and Port Adelaide. Where are they at the moment? I mean, obviously Port are sitting second on the table, but they're not convincing me completely. They are convincing me that they are around the mark. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not chopping them down by any stretch of the imagination, but I do worry that they are going to get a team's going to get a hold of them, and probably Collingwood's the one that I think is going to get a hold of them. And if they do make it to another grand final, are Collingwood going to do what Geelong did? I mean, that's my worry from a Port point of view.
Maybe, but then you don't win premierships in August. I don't really think.
I'm not too fussed about their loss on the weekend to Carlton. They've won 13 in a row.
Yeah.
And they've rested or managed 7 players. I totally get that. But does that start to play around a little bit with the psyche? And you did mention earlier on that they are relying on too few to do too much. And if teams get a hold of them and shut those players down, is that going to be an issue?
Maybe, but then they might get those players freshened up, ready for September. If it's a dry ground in September...
Scary, yes, I totally agree.
And they still should finish 1 or 2 with Brisbane losing last week, so it doesn't really hurt them that much. They finish 1 or 2, dry grounds, you get through to the big dance.
Anything can happen.
You're in it.
Now, Adelaide, we talk about Adelaide. We've talked about it ourselves before the podcast and obviously over the weekend. I think Adelaide are about where they should be, really. Being... a little bit impartial, in that I think that their improvement has been fantastic. I believe that the supporters should have expectations. I totally understand that part of it. But realistically, they're about where they should be right now.
I didn't have Adelaide making the 8, and they're not going to make the 8 now. I still think their weaknesses in ruck, that extra key defender, definitely lack a big body midfielder. There's 3 huge areas of concern. For mine, Adelaide, ruck's been a weakness since 2017. Some Adelaide supporters still carrying on like Riley O'Brien's fantastic.
Well,
he tries hard.
He gives you great effort, and that's all you can ask of a player. But you need to have somebody that's got a bit of X factor about them. Now, ruckmen aren't growing on trees. That's the problem.
No. And look,
this is the problem.
The decision of Don Pike to overrule the recruiting committee and not get Tim English hurts you for the next decade.
Yep.
So that's where people don't really get. Decisions like that are so vital. And
all right, so
I can't see Adelaide unless Thilthorpe suddenly improves in the ruck, but for mine, he's a real worry. I don't think he likes the body contact side of it, which you've got to embrace as a ruckman and love it. I can't see Adelaide improving enough with those weaknesses in their list to take the next step to really compete.
Okay, so Port Adelaide are in the same boat, really, with their ruck situation. I mean, they've been able to cobble together a ruck setup.
Lysett and Finlayson's, I think, is well in front of Adelaide's.
Yep, absolutely.
Lysett at his best fit, but he's carrying injuries at the moment.
Yep.
Lysett, and then Dixon comes in to pinch hit, and Dixon does that well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if those three are up and going, but there's injury concerns against two of the three.
Okay, so then Adelaide, we flip it back to Adelaide and go, all right, we've got Riley O'Brien, Strawn, and Thilthorpe. I mean,
I'd have a look at Strawn.
Yep.
I can't see the point of he's virtually a very well-paid SANFL player.
Yep.
For goodness sake, have a look at him.
Absolutely.
Be honest, O'Brien isn't up to it. Have a look at someone else. Have a look at him.
So who, in your opinion, should Adelaide be looking at as far as a ruck replacement if Riley O'Brien is a good, honest battler, does his job each week, gives you a great heart, but doesn't have the X factor? Who should they go after to get their X factor?
I do wonder for Riley if Brodie Grundy now comes into the equation.
I'm going to talk about that one a little bit later, so let's hold fire on that one. You talked about Backman. Obviously, keeping Duday, and we mentioned this a little bit last week, keeping Duday is really, really important.
I think
it is now.
More than they thought they were going to.
And you add Redmond to that, their backline starts to look a lot better.
But they let that key back. Butts probably hasn't progressed as much as they thought. I think injuries have played a part there, getting concussed. Hamill probably didn't progress in that way as well. So I think Murray's been the one who's been very good, but I think they lack that key backman still. I think they can get still caught up by a gorilla. And
then you talked about a big body midfield. I mean, again, a bit like Ruckman, a little class is hard to come by. You've got to develop your own. Is there anyone within the list that might be able to develop, or is there someone that they could pinch for next to nothing?
Not really sure where Nankervis, Dowling come in the equation, whether they're going to be big enough or not. I like Dowling from having watched him play for North 18s last year, and that I think he's got a bit to offer. But again, that's probably long-term project. And Taylor getting injured was the other one, and I think they were going to look at and hasn't come through. I haven't quite worked out. Matty Crouch, very well paid SANFL player. I think why not have put him back in the middle and put Laird back to halfback? Yes, you can't play Laird and Crouch together. They lack pace, not elite by disposal. I would have put Laird back to halfback. So anyway.
So just going back to Redmond very, very quickly, could the Crows look to develop him a bit like Dawson? They picked him up from Sydney off of a halfback flank. Redmond's in the same boat. Two elite users of the ball.
It's definitely potential there.
So then they really still need to look for a big body backman anyway. Fair call. Yep. All right, so we move on to round 19. We've got Essendon v the Bulldogs.
Gee, that's a real toss of the coin job. Big game for both.
Yep. Well, they all, for the next 4 or 5 weeks, they're all big games for a lot of teams. There's not too many teams getting too much of a free ride, are they? Is
that Marvel?
That is at Marvel. Yeah, Marvel Stadium.
I'll go Essendon. But, that is real toss of the coin.
Fair call. I expect Essendon to be a little bit dirty after last week. I expect the Bulldogs to be a bit dirty, but I don't know. I just think there's something about Essendon that is just showing that little bit more class when it needs to be, with a lot of players that are performing above where expected.
I reckon that's a
toss the coin. He's tossed the coin. Fair enough. Richmond v the Hawks at the MCG.
Richmond.
If it was at Marvel, then we might change it. Fair call. Carlton v West Coast. Carlton. Brisbane v Geelong at the Gabba.
Since it's at the Gabba, they've won 40 out of their last 44, I think it is. So I'll go Brisbane.
I think you have to back Brisbane at the moment, but we mentioned 3 or 4 weeks ago that Geelong are quietly coming, but not setting the world on fire doing it. I mean, obviously beating up on Essendon last week was huge, but I think they're around the mark. But I think Brisbane at home.
It's a big game.
Freo v the Swans.
Ooh.
Optus Stadium.
Well, we've almost run out of patience for Fremantle. I might go Sydney.
Sydney need they're basically the wrecking ball at the moment. They can be the wrecking ball for a lot of teams at the moment. I think Sydney might do the job over Freo over in Perth. So, all right, big one, Collingwood v Port Adelaide.
Yeah, here, obviously.
Yes.
We'd like to see the Port side on who comes up and all that side of things. But I just reckon Collingwood a bit more settled at the moment. You almost got to go the Pies, I reckon.
Butters is a big one for me. Still under a little bit of an injury cloud. Do Port look to take the bigger picture, or do they roll out and bring all their players back in and away they go? I think you're right. Collingwood are very settled. Top of the table for a reason, really.
Yeah, huge game. It's not sitting on the fence in terms of, I think I'll probably end up tipping Collingwood, but I do want to see the Port side.
Yep, fair call. And, yep, I think Collingwood as well, but only just. I think it's going to be a great game. And like you, I want to see the teams. Yeah. And, again, we're recording a little bit earlier than usual. Yep. All right, GWS v the Suns at Manuka.
Ooh, I'll go GWS.
Yeah, I think GWS as well. I think the Suns are going to give them a fairly good run, but I reckon the GWS Giants are up and about at the moment, and they're on a bit of a streak as well. So they want to play finals, and really they're good enough to do it. And Adam Kingley's done a great job, and we mentioned this, I think, at about round 12. I was impressed with how the Giants were just hanging in a lot of games and doing what they needed to do. So, all right, another big game, Melbourne v the Adelaide Crows at the MCG. So Melbourne. The Crows get another game at the MCG. It's not going to matter.
No, Melbourne.
Gawn, Grundy combination.
Whether Grundy didn't get picked last week.
Yeah.
So I think Gawn might feast. He might dine out, I think.
Does that mean Gawn plays up forward and then Grundy in the ruck to bring him back? Horses for courses, considering Adelaide do struggle with a little bit of tall timber down back?
Maybe, but I think they may just go, right, bugger it. That worked last week with Gawn. Gawn was best on ground. He is the best ruckman in the comp. Let him go and let him destroy O'Brien.
We mentioned last week about their ability to score. Well, that combination being changed around a little bit seemed to allow them to score a lot better.
Yeah, Hibbert back in and kicked a couple when it counted. Started really well, but missed a couple and then finished well. So
Interesting. And to finish us off, mate, St Kilda v North Melbourne.
Well, you've got to go St Kilda, but, geez, you just have to tip St Kilda. You can't tip North Melbourne or West Coast. It's almost...
Obviously, Clarkson's back in the club rooms. He's not necessarily coaching as such, but do they sort of get a little bit of an uplift from him coming back into the building? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's hard, and St Kilda definitely need to win, but if they lose to North Melbourne, there's no way they're going to be playing finals, so we can put a ruler through that. All right, mate, we'll leave the AFL where it is, and we'll check back in next week. All right, we move on to the SANFL, round 13. West Adelaide just going down to Central Districts.
Yeah, in front at three-quarter time, but the Dogs did run over them and keeps them well and truly in touch.
A little bit of a surprise of the round here with Adelaide defeating Glenelg.
Yeah, look, I think Adelaide, if they're reasonably close to full strength, they're going to trouble all sides. So I'm not really surprised at that. The old thing, they kicked a couple straight and the Bays missed a few. You know, as we know, it's a fine line between pleasure and pain.
It is indeed. And once again, good goal kicking wins your games. Yep. Bad goal kicking costs you games. Yes. So very interesting there. Port Adelaide finally getting over the Roosters. I think the first time for a couple of games. So Port Adelaide are pretty impressive, not only from the point of view that they had 7 out in their AFL side. They've actually put a side together that was very, very competitive against North Adelaide, who I still rate pretty highly, and won. So is it a case of that North didn't have too much time to do their homework because all these players exited? I don't think so.
I just think pretty disappointing by the Roosters in that way, and huge result by Port, and Port should now play finals.
So both Adelaide and Port Adelaide are going to be playing in the SANFL finals. Woodville West Torrens defeating Norwood. Norwood with them all the way, and then Jimmy Rowe kicks an absolute howler, and they go on with it from there.
Rowe was the match winner. He was the class player on the ground. I've got to be honest, that's from a Norwood perspective, it was a bloody average game of football.
Yep.
It was a game of two sides who are both struggling.
Yep. Fair call. And We sort of pumped Woodville West Torrens up at the beginning of the year, looking at them going that they should be all right. And Dan Menzel's obviously retired from SANFL footy during the week. So, very, very interesting that it was an ordinary game from your point of view.
It was terrible. Lots of errors by both sides, obviously. And sitting up in the grandstand, and I actually just heard Riley Knight in the last quarter, because the last quarter of the first 10 minutes was just both sides. It was like neither side wanted to kick a goal.
Tearing their hair
Stockdale
out.
missed from 5 yards out for Nord, which would have put us a goal up.
Yep.
He said next goal wins, and I turned to him and went, geez,
You might be right.
he said it mucking around.
5 minutes into the last quarter.
Shocking.
And Sturt defeating South Adelaide.
Yeah, they were impressive on Sunday. I did go to that game as well. And the game was over at three-quarter time, and it was going to be one or the other. Win by 15 or win by 5. Take the foot off the pedal and win by 5.
Yep.
And it was the latter. But
Sturt struggled a little bit over the last few weeks, but seemed to have regained a little bit of mojo, and maybe they just went through a little bit of a period of adjustment, some heavy grounds in the last couple of weeks. It was a little bit better on the weekend.
And Unley was a bit weird. It was three-quarters of the ground was in pretty reasonable nick, but there was about a quarter of it was still mud bog. So a player would be running flat out, get to that spot and do a 360 arse overhead. And so it was a bit amusing at times as well, where people just couldn't stand up in that spot. So, yeah.
Absolutely funny. All right, we move on to round 14. Glenelg v West Adelaide.
I'll go the Bays.
Roosters v Norwood. At Prospect.
At the Wembley of the North. Can't tip Nord after last week. Hopefully Matty Panos will be back, but it was a bit scary of life without Panos, actually. I'll go the Roosters.
Fair call. At Prospect, they're always going to be tough to beat. Centrals v South Adelaide.
At the Ponderosa.
Yeah,
yes. I'll go the Dogs.
Port Adelaide v Sturt. Good game.
Yeah, I'll go Sturt.
Yeah, at Albert and Oval.
At Albert, yeah. I'd like, again, I want to see the Port side, how many they get back.
Yep. You can't not tip Sturt at the moment. They, as well as Glenelg, are the form sides. Yeah, they've had their hiccups along the way for a couple of weeks in a row. But yeah, Sturt for me as well. And Adelaide v Woodville West Torrens. This could get a little bit messy.
Yeah, I'll go Adelaide. I will say back to Sturt. McFadden, very good. Son of Brian, past Shield player for Tasmania and Bradman medalist. Mm-hmm. And he has bought a copy of my book, so there I better give him a mention.
Absolutely.
He was impressive. Hone is quick for Sturt, and I was sitting there thinking, geez, I'd wish you were a Red Lake.
Yep.
So, yeah, there was a couple of Sturt. Reschke up from the reserves. Didn't do much, but still gave him a bit of a focal, and they were impressive, Sturt. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. And the ladder, Glenelg sitting top, Sturt sitting second only by percentage. Adelaide sitting third, Port Adelaide sitting fourth. North Adelaide have scraped into the 5, and Central's just on the borderline of the 5 as well. Can't make a case for Woodville West Torrens at the moment, who are a game behind Central's, and South Adelaide are 2 games behind 5th spot as well. Season basically over now for West Adelaide and Norwood, which is quite sad, but now playing for pride, let's hope that they can start putting in some implementation, some plans for the follow-up year next year.
We can only hope.
Before we go on break, Wimbledon, what a fantastic Wimbledon tournament that we had this year. Are we seeing a bit of a changing of era? Wimbledon has a new king.
Yeah, I hope so, because, look, let's be honest, it had got a bit, Federer and Nadal drop off, and so it was just Djokovic, seemingly. There was, Tsitsipas and a couple of others had fallen away a bit.
Yep.
And Alcaraz was seeded 1 and came through, and it was a fantastic final. It ebbed and flowed. Amazing
that the number 1 seeded only really ever played 4 matches 4 tournaments on grass leading up to, I'm sure he's played tournaments in his juniors, but 4 tournaments leading into Wimbledon on grass, ranked number 1 seed, and we were salivating that this could be the final. We didn't quite get it at Roland Garros. It was a semi-final. Alcaraz actually cramped up in that, so we didn't get to see them going toe-to-toe, and yet at Wimbledon it was magnificent tennis.
Oh, it was fantastic. And, I think the majority of us as neutrals were barracking for Alcaraz.
You're right.
So I suddenly said him somewhere there. Faux pas. Coming through, and so it was a great result.
Gripping gripping final. Alcaraz losing the first set 6-1, and you're like, all right. An up-and-coming player. He's won the US Open, so he's been there. He sort of does that, and Djokovic jumps out the blocks and goes back, bang, bang, bang. And for Alcaraz to recover the way that he did was testament to his ability to hang into games, and the shots and the way that these guys were trading blows was unbelievable.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
No, it was vintage Wimbledon. It was the Connors McEnroe, the Borg McEnroe, whatever. It was that sort of stuff, and it was awesome.
One game, I think it was in the fourth set. It was probably about 2:33 in the morning here in Australia. Goes for 26 minutes. Neither player wanting to give an edge, but Alcaraz ends up getting the break, and that was decisive.
Yeah, no, awesome, great result in the end. And fascinating in the female side of things as well.
Absolutely. Vondrousova.
Yes.
Well
played.
Thank you. Beats Jabbar at 6-4, 6-4. Again, wide open field.
First unseeded player for...
This is what I was leading to. Something around that. Obviously, in the men's side of it, Goran Ivanisevic did it against Patrick Rafter. But as far as the women's go, very open field. Anybody looked like they were going to win it at any stage. But Vondrousova, obviously, on this occasion, coming up with the goods with 6-4, 6-4 victory.
Oh, it was incredible to come through. Yep.
So obviously Vondrousova winning that one in straight sets, and we have two new Wimbledon champions, which I think is great for the sport.
Yeah. No, awesome.
All right, mate, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk cricket, and we'll talk to our special guests.
Liking this podcast? Please like, rate, and subscribe. You're listening to the Game On Podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
All right, mate, we continue on with Around the Grounds. Cricket, third test. England got a hold of Australia. Now we move on to the fourth test. What are we expecting here? Australia trying to obviously retain the Ashes. Probably got a little bit blown out of the water in that last test with a few decisions that, from a coaching point of view.
Short bowling crap. If they continue with that, there'll be a TV at Reeds Road could be in distinct danger. I turned it off last test because I was just so angry at this stupidity of removing Bold and caught behind, Bold and LBW out of the equation.
Yep.
7 for 140. If we bowl well, then they're all out for 180.
Yep.
Australia win. Australia have won the Ashes.
We did talk about it last week. Moving on to the fourth test, we've just received notice just a couple of hours before the start of the fourth test that Australia are not going to go in with a recognised spinner.
Well, it smacks of that Cummins hasn't got the confidence of Murphy. And let's remember too, Murphy's success in India was playing under Smith's captaincy, so it's a little bit different there. And it did smack. Well, hang on, we picked him. Surely he's got a bowl on the last day, and he didn't. So there's no point in playing him in that way. So Australia have gone the long batting.
Couple of all-rounders in there.
Yeah, so and Kerry bats 8, so he's pretty good number 8.
Yep.
Wait and see. Look, I hope Green bowls more this test match, and they say we want it up.
Yep.
Only the short ball as the variation, not the stock ball crap.
Yep. Did we get a bit sucked into what England were doing to Australia in that second innings with some of those short balls, or was it? It almost looked like it was a preconceived idea that this is how we're going to play and get them out.
It was just dumb, and I'm sorry. What is McDonald doing there in that way as a coach? Honestly,
is the tactic
ridiculous?
Is the tactic based around that they are playing baseball and they're going to swipe and have a crack at anything and it'll go up in the air and we'll catch them out? I mean,
the first ball after lunch, so we'd got Wokes out the ball before, so Stark's bowling, would actually set up for a bouncer. He was back almost in a baseball stance, and I'm going, pitch the freaking thing up.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy. I remember sitting there doing the same thing. Do we see England making too many changes for this test?
No, it's just Anderson for Robinson
Yep.
for England.
Yep.
It's at Anderson's home ground. Look,
Now, Australia, we did hear this stat a little bit earlier, and even I had to scratch my head going, wow, really? Australia haven't lost there since 1981.
yeah, since both of them, don't worry, some of us are still getting
Dirty.
off the psychologist's couch for that test match. Look, it's been a happy hunting ground. Look, I just hope we bat and make plenty and make 500 or so, and then who cares if it did rain.
Yep.
So,
Fair cool. All right. So, yes, the Australian men's team, by the time this episode goes out, we may actually have a result. So, let's hope this time round we're retaining the Ashes and smiling from ear to ear. And next week we can party on, that's for sure.
Oh.
Mate, the Australian women's team losing 4 out of their last 5 games, but they only grabbed the game that they needed to retain the Ashes.
Yeah, look, a weird system. I'd much rather have another test match there than why we're considering 2020s hit and giggle cricket, which I don't think internationally should be played. That's my own opinion. I think it should be only at domestic level, but that's another story again.
Yep.
Australia were disappointing last night. You know, had England 2 for 12 effectively if we won the Ashes, not just retain.
Yes.
And then bowled average. Unfortunately, Talia McGrath dropped a pretty easy caught and bowled. Healy missed a stumping through poor technique. I admit I've never considered her a great keeper. I think she's a batsman who keeps as well.
Yep.
I think Jones for England's a far better keeper. And Sarah Taylor before that was a fantastic keeper.
Yep.
Kept for played some A-grade district cricket out here. Kept for Northern Districts, and some of the Northern Districts old folks think she was just as good, if not better, than Graham Minot. So they rated her massively. And then they fell away. And Australia's chase was a bit weird. So to be bowled out for 200 in the 35th over. So if we'd batted our overs out, we were going to win. So, it was disappointing.
So we jumped ahead, obviously, there, talking about last night's game. Yeah. The game before, obviously, Australia retaining the Ashes with 7 for 282. So, England chasing down with needed 6 runs off of the last ball, obviously winning by 3 runs, or 4 runs to tie and then a super over. Australia, their game last night almost reflected that they'd had a big night 2 nights earlier after retaining the Ashes.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of interest level may have just disappeared a little bit, but competitive sports people are going to try and win at all costs. So this is where I was just trying to lead it a little bit.
No, I just thought we just didn't play well.
Yeah.
I don't think in that way. I think they were pretty keen to win it.
Is it a case of the rest of the world
I think
catching
they're catching up?
Catching up, not trying to catch up. They are catching up.
And it was funny. I actually thought beforehand, I reckon Gardner needs a big one and got 40 odd pretty quick and got run out. And who knows what would have happened if she hadn't got run out.
So obviously Australia getting bowled out for 199, but England 9 for 285, really in control of the match and winning by 69 runs as we talked about.
280 odd was considered a gettable target. It's a small ground there at Taunton, and I know they said that's why you bat second because you generally win batting second there. And we just lost too many wickets. You know, Perry got 50 odd off 58.
53 off 58 balls, and Gardner got 41 off of 24 balls. So, McGrath got 26 off 39. So a couple of starts there, but also a couple of failures as well.
I think there were 6 who got double figures, who owned double figures. So, disappointing. You just needed one of them to get a big score. And
to go on with it.
And it would have been at least a close finish.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, mate, we move on. We talk a little bit of AFL trade talk. The foundations for the Tasmanian First list build are in place, with the AFL now looking to finalise the finer details in what the league's 19th club will provide to construct its initial playing group ahead of its entry in 2028. Now, this relates to the trade because there are going to be some models that have worked, some that haven't worked in the past. Where do you sort of sit on that as far as, do we go down the GWS model? Do we go down the Port Adelaide model? Do we go down the Gold Coast model?
I think GWS were better than what Gold Coast were with picking up experience. There's got to be a mixture of experience and youth.
Does that mean
get the the majority of the first rounders.
Well, and I think this is what's been talked about at the moment in not front-ending too many of those picks to a new franchise on the basis that the teams that are down bottom at that stage take longer to regenerate. But it's also important that Tasmania is successful. But then again, you don't want to compromise. You don't want to compromise it any more than what it already is.
Oh, look, I still think there's too many teams now, let alone another one.
Yeah. Do they get better value out of, say, additional picks inside the top 20, top 30, where they can then on-trade those picks for senior players?
That's probably what will happen. Yeah. So I think we just got to wait and see.
Yeah, but it's interesting that obviously, we're only 5 years away, really, at the end of the day. They're pre-planning this now, and obviously the stadium's still a contentious point with a lot of locals down in Tasmania.
Yeah, so who knows?
So it's an ever-changing target at the moment as far as that goes. Yeah. All right, mate, still on trade talk. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I told you to hold fire. Now it's time to let rip, mate. Brodie Grundy, is he going to be a more viable option for Port Adelaide or the Adelaide Crows, if they were to go down that path?
I think he's viable for both. I couldn't understand him going to Melbourne in terms of Grundy's always been a ruckman, not a forward, a ruckman. And so we've gone with the Grundy-Gawn combination, of which both of them everyone's better off as a first ruck. So I think he's going to still be in demand. It's quite bizarre that you're going to have Collingwood. It'll look like if he does get traded, Collingwood and Melbourne
are playing part of his
salary. So it's weird.
Are we getting down the path of more American sports where players are sent to, and even soccer to a certain degree, or EPL teams, where part of your salary is paid by 2 or 3 clubs that you then end up at?
It's potentially going that way. Yeah, no doubt about that.
I see Grundy being an advantage to Adelaide more than Port Adelaide a little bit at this stage. But whether Grundy wants to move back to Adelaide, that's or South Australia, I should say, is still up in the air. I mean, part of going to Melbourne was he wanted to stay in Melbourne. Yeah. So does that then open up, say, Carlton's trading options for him, or Geelong, as an example, who don't always have a recognised ruckman, or they do, but struggling a little bit as well.
And if De Koning leaves Carlton, does Grundy come the equation there? Who knows? Let's wait and see.
All right, mate, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Mary Cavey will join us to talk all things soccer, and in particular the World Cup.
Definitely.
Liking this podcast? Please like, rate, and subscribe. Five good minutes in the clubhouse.
As we mentioned before, we thought that we'd get Mary back on being a soccer aficionado that she is, obviously part of the Red Army, but obviously a keen eye over the World Cup, which is starting here this week in Australia. Welcome aboard, Mary.
Yeah, welcome, Mary.
Happy to be back, guys. How have we been?
Too bad. And, of course, there's been some good news in terms of Craig Goodwin this week, in terms of Adelaide United focus with a couple of awards.
Definitely. Yeah, man of the hour for quite a few hours, that one. He's done very well this year. We're stoked.
Oh, he's had an incredible year. So, yeah. Obviously, Adelaide United were a little bit disappointing. We seemed to run out of puff there towards the end, but had some momentum, but fell away just before the finals and couldn't really recover there, Mary.
No, yeah, look, I agree. I think, trying to give some of the young boys a go was good, but maybe wasn't the experience we needed at times. And just some tactical decisions and substitution decisions weren't quite right towards the end, in my opinion. But, hey, it's the beauty of this sort of game and league is that there's always another shot at it. So bring on next season.
And now, of course, we've opened up for, arguably the biggest soccer event ever in the country, in the Women's World Cup. Look, it showed the incredible crowd the other night at the trial game, of warm-up friendly, whatever you want to call it, friendly at soccer terms. So go for it, Mary. It's we eagerly await.
Absolutely, that was just such a good lead into the tournament. Having over 50,000 people, honestly, it brought tears to my eyes. This this is a dream come true for any women's football fan. You know, when I was 6, 7 years old, the Matildas were, you know, paying for their own lunches, working full time, trying to make ends meet, raising families, and just having to scrape the bottom of the barrel just to go and represent their country. And, you know, 20, 30, 40 years later, and now we are holding the biggest tournament in the world for women, and it's all right here in our backyard. And it's to have that many fans come out, knowing that, I mean, I coach men's amateur football on a Sunday, and those blokes have got tickets to these games. You know, they're actually flying into state to see England and the Matildas and big teams, and it's just insane, and it just makes me so happy.
And also, as a female side of things, like Sam Kerr is obviously our best player at the moment. It's got to give a fair bit of pride on a female side of things as well, Mary.
Absolutely. She's such a superstar on and off the pitch. Like, she's just so down to earth. I love that, you know, she hasn't changed her hairstyle since she was 12. You know, you never see her with makeup. True. I mean, she accepts these prestigious awards. She holds the flag for King Charles's coronation. She hasn't got a wink of makeup on her. She's just so authentic, and you know, she's just living the absolute dream for little girls and even little boys. And, you know, it's she's just an impeccable role model on and off the pitch.
Were you surprised, going back to obviously talking about the game, the friendly the other night, were you surprised that it was a sellout, or, you know, that it was practically a sellout?
No, I wasn't. I think
it's been
Sam
coming,
Kerr and the rest of them, it's been coming. You know, these girls have worked their bums off to really promote the women's game. You know, they Ellie Carpenter, you know, hugely popular, going and playing in France, getting into the Champions League, obviously injuring herself. But, you know, your Caitlin Fords, your Alana Kennedys, they're playing in the Women's Super League over in England. These girls are doing great things all around the world in the biggest leagues in the world. And I think this was naturally going to happen because you just can't help but barrack for them because you know how hard they've worked and how, you know, 2 or 3 of them have got their little babies in the camps like that. You know, motherhood doesn't stop. So, thoroughly deserved. And I'm really, really glad that people have come out and backed it.
Absolutely. Obviously, looking over the 2023 World Cup squad, there's a lot of women who have moved overseas for greater opportunities. Is that something that Australia, in general, are working towards to have a Premier League style setup where, you know, you've got, obviously, you talked about Sam Kerr being at Chelsea, Caitlin Ford being at Arsenal, you know, and Leicester City and Western Sydney Wanderers is being represented, Brisbane Roar being represented as well. Is that something that Australia have got to get a little bit better at to attract those players to be at home a little bit more?
Yeah, look, you'd love to see it, and I think we deserve it, but you know, I think it's a little ways away to get anywhere near those overseas levels. You know, the men's competition here needs a bit of work in places as it is, let alone the women's. You know, they've got a much shorter season, they've got less teams. They're pretty far off the mark. So, you know, the finance and the injection of cash is pretty way off the mark still. So I think it's a while away, to be honest, to compete. But you know, it's a perfect stepping stone, and it's still a perfect environment to grow in this country. You know, the women's football. I started playing when I was 7. Do you know what I mean? That was the early 90s. There's a base for little girls to start. They can grow. You can play in the NPLs here in your home city, and then you can aim for the A-League, and then, you know, make your mark in there and get scouted to go overseas, and that becomes the next dream. And now they're coming back and, you know, playing a World Cup in their own country. So it's all fully come, you know, full circle for a lot of these girls. And I think, like I said, Australia's got a little ways to go to compete with the other leagues, but it's a brilliant place to be able to watch these girls in the beginning of their careers and watch them push on from there.
The extraordinary crowd in terms of for the friendly, it actually reminded me of the Crows Eston where the same thing happened at the Crows.
People are excited.
The week before the Crows, where they were expecting to get 5,000 to 10,000, and it was 50,000 at Footy Park back in 91. So it's similar to that. It was an amazing thing. So the bit now, one, we've got to see how Australia goes in the tournament. You know, big first up, obviously, against Ireland, and go from there. But to see what the potential benefits for the game of women's football is in the country afterwards as well. It'd just be really interesting to see what growth and that side of things there is for the potential sponsorship as well. And let's be honest, a company looking at that, hey, shit, 50,000 at a trial game, we might jump aboard here.
Yep,
100%. So there's potential there in so many different areas.
Is Football Australia ready for that though?
Oh, look,
and this
probably would have asked the same question after the men's World Cup game when we did so well. They really had an opportunity to ride that bandwagon that we had already hitched, and honestly, I think they kind of stuffed it back then. So I really hope they don't do it again. But look, I feel like we're sort of witnessing something incredible right now. Like this really is the turn of women's football internationally, globally. I feel like if you get involved in this, it's going to be something that you can say, I was there.
Yep.
And I hope everybody gets around it, and I hope that Football Australia grab it with both hands, because like I said a million times, these girls deserve it. Future generations of girls deserve it. And little old Adelaide has 5 games to get around, let alone if you want to just jump on a flight to Brisbane or Sydney, drive yourself to Melbourne. There's so many incredible games that you can get to really see what women's football has to offer. I think we're seeing something spectacular really build.
How many games on your radar to attend, Mary? I reckon that was Pete and I were both thinking the same thing there.
All of them in Adelaide. We're off to Brisbane this weekend for England, and I've also already got a gig as a volunteer here in Adelaide. So I'm actually a driver. So I'll be driving around the referees, FIFA execs. Maybe I'll get someone famous from the airport. It was an instant no-brainer for me when they.
That doesn't surprise me, Mary. I reckon you might have put it in the application like 6 months before we knew Australia had got the tournament. So that's awesome, Mary. Well done.
October last year, mate.
Well played.
What games are you looking forward to? Not only the ones that you're going to, but what games are you looking forward to seeing either on TV or visiting in person for the World Cup?
Look, Brazil are full of class. Obviously, long term, just general champions. Married an Englishman, and I've got English family myself, so we're catching England a couple of times. We're just going to love seeing them. I was gutted when Ellen White friggin' retired right before the World Cup, because she was my favourite player.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm not going to see her, but I think England just for personal reasons. Look, I'll watch anybody, mate. You know me, I just get around anything women's sport, and I'm just gonna have a grin on my face for the next 4 weeks.
All right, Mary, come on, give us your tips. Go, give us where will Australia finish?
Where will Australia finish? I think if it would be pretty heartbreaking if they didn't at least make the semi. So I'm going to say top 4, just with the home ground advantage, with the excitement that's built here, with their game, their positive games and results that they've got leading up to the tournament. I think things are just really quite on track for these girls this year. I feel like might not be their year to win it, but I feel like they're going to be right up there in the top 3 or 4 in the finish. But it's going to be hard to beat the USA. This will be their 3rd World Cup. If they get this one, they've still got the best of the best out there playing for them. And then obviously England. They're going to be my top 3s. I think they'll be my picks.
You stole my thunder with the USA there, Mary. I was going to ask, is there any big challenges for them, or are they still just that streak ahead at the moment?
I just feel like they are a cut above in so many ways. They've got the money. There's never a shortage of money and facilities and resources thrown at them. They've got a brilliant league over there for the girls to play in if they don't want to travel abroad. And they've got, it's not dissimilar to the Matildas. They've got girls that have been literally, that they'd be in their 4th or 5th World Cup at this point. That's how consistent they've been. Yeah. You don't get that in the men's, and especially not Australia, because it took us such a long time to get back into that top 32. But yeah, the USA, they've got girls that are onto, they've been literally playing for their country for 20 odd years, and they're still at the peak of their fitness. and just have everything game plan. They just have completely gelled. But, so I think that's why they will be hard to beat. But I also feel like Australia have that as well. They've found the right mix of old blood and new blood with this squad. So, this is going to be the best chance we've ever had.
Why have USA been so successful in women's football when it's not their main sport on a male side of things? What's your theories there?
The first thing that comes to my mind is just the codes of football and sports that are popular over there. The male demographic, they love their NFL, their NHL. They're really sort of heavy hitting sports. Your hockeys and your baseball and your and your footy or football. Gridiron type things. Yep. And it's no different here. That the major codes for men and women in the same country can be completely different. Yep. You guys would easily say the main code for men in Australia would be AFL. But, for women, there's a reason that the SANFLW, sorry, I'm not a footy fan, but, the women's SANFL only started a few years ago.
Yep.
And you saw an influx of women jumping from round ball to egg ball because that was the first opportunity that they could play at that level. There hadn't been anything that good for them up until that point. They're playing in the boys' leagues until they were 13, 14.
Yep.
So they played soccer from a young age because that was the sport that they could go and kick a ball.
Yeah.
So it comes down to opportunity. It comes down to resources, what codes do well for either gender, I suppose. But obviously over in America, the women have always had soccer available for them.
That's well put.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get you out here on this one this time. Australia v Ireland tomorrow night, Thursday here in Australia. What's your tip, Mary?
I think we'll get them. I think we've had far better preparation. I don't know if you heard in the news, but Ireland's last friendly game against Colombia actually got canned after 20 minutes because Colombia very severely injured one of their girls, and they actually called it off due to just the physicality of that friendly. Wow. So I feel like that's kind of halted their prep. They haven't gone out on a high. They haven't gone out, now they've got injury concerns. So I think Australia will get the win. It might not be a huge win, but I'd love to see it. I'd love to see like a 3-1 or a 4-1 just to really kick things off strong.
Absolutely. Well, we watch that one with great interest. Once again, Mary, thanks for joining us, talking all things soccer, especially with the World Cup. We'll have to get you back on when the business end of the tournament and the A-League starting up for next season. And we've got to get your lovely husband on to talk all things EPL as well. So we've got some good soccer contacts coming up, I reckon.
Definitely.
Anytime, guys. Been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mary.
Take care.
Bye.
You're listening to the Game On Podcast. We'll be right back after this short break. 5 good minutes in the clubhouse.
We welcome Craig Martin back to the Game On podcast here, talking all things golf, especially with the British Open coming up, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, it's an exciting time of the year, probably for all golf fanatics. It's maybe the Masters has it covered, but in terms of the field and the history of the sport, they can't go past the British Open.
Yeah, even as a non-golfing fanatic and all that, I'm the Masters one, but British too. So, it's ironic that you said that with you being a golfing man. So, yeah.
Well, I think from an Australian point of view over the years, it's probably a lot more history with the British Open. We've looked back to Peter Thompson and even prior to Peter Thompson, but, obviously with Greg Norman and Baker Finch, we've had a really good success rate. And obviously Cam Smith winning last year, defending champion. So when you compare that to only one winner with Adam Scott winning the US Masters, it's a happy hunting ground for the Aussies.
Who knows what might happen this year? But take us through, mate. What's the field looking like, and who have you got your eye on?
Well, I've been in contact with a few guys, Cam Smith's coach, and also Ewan Porter, who's the roving reporter for the DP World Tour. So I presume he'll be on the Australian coverage. The reports back from over there is they've had a lot of rain. So traditionally, a British Open course has been hard and fast, but obviously with the Ashes on as well in Manchester, there's a fair bit of rain. So the golf course is very lush. It's at Royal Liverpool, which is at Hoylake, which is probably the best way to describe it. It's probably a bit like, let's say, Wollonga to Adelaide. So it's technically part of Liverpool, but it's just out, maybe more McLaren Vale type of thing. So, so weather conditions, the golf course, they haven't had a British Open there since 2014. Rory McIlroy, ironically, he won last week on the Scottish Open, but that was his last major victory 9 years ago. So the golf course has had a lot of changes since then. They've lengthened it and changed a lot of holes. Even the 18th hole, for argument's sake, they were hitting 5 irons into the par 5. It's been lengthened by 60 yards, and they've brought in the angle for out of bounds a lot more difficult. So I think, it's going to be an interesting event. Like any major, the cream will rise to the top, and we'll wait and see. I mean, it's like throwing a dart, predicting golf. I think Australia-wise, Cam will definitely be up there, but I think a good tip was Minwoo Lee. He's destined to be a superstar, and this event just suits his game. I think I mentioned it in our last podcast. This suits him perfectly. Conditions, pure ball striker, great putter. But for the actual event, it'd be interesting to see how Rory goes. His performances have been much better in recent times since he's stayed out of the political stuff, and there's probably some reasons behind the scenes for that, which will all come out in due course. But it's interesting week. You'll probably see the first 2 days there'll be a bolter, an unknown will be leading and go, who's this guy? But I think when it comes to the crunch, it'll be Rory, and it'll be Scotty Scheffler. Look out for Xander Schauffele. I think he's due for a major. Colin Morikawa, DJ. I mean, it'll be all the big names will be up there. So exciting viewing for everyone.
What are we expecting from Cam Smith? Can he go back to back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Cam, he's such. I mean, last year proved it, and his form's been pretty good. He had a recent win, obviously, on the Live Tour. I know people think, obviously, that if they're not playing as much, but the Live guys, they're the best, some of the best players in the world. So I have no issue with, not having enough form under his belt, so to speak. But he's recently had a win. I'd be highly surprised if Cam didn't figure. He's too good a player. And just talking to Grant Field on Instagram chat today, last night, sorry. He's pretty happy. He's nice and relaxed. He's a pretty laid-back guy, Cam. So he gets that putter going, and if he can control his driver, and so he's not hacking it out of the rough, he'll certainly be up and figuring it.
And what else is happening in the golfing world, Craig?
Well, actually, on a local front, some exciting news yesterday. It was announced the PGA Tour of Australasia have announced a TPS event coming to Adelaide at Wollonga Golf Course in October. So a couple of years ago, I went over to Sydney and caddied in one of the events at Bonnie Doon, which was hosted by Braithen Astor, the rugby league player. This event is going to be hosted by Greg Blewett, which is fantastic. Yep. Bluey, obviously, we all know from cricket, but
big golf man, Bluey.
He hits a pretty good golf ball, I've heard.
He's represented South Australia in golf, exactly. So there's not too many guys who claim to fame can say that they've represented Australia plus their state in other sports. I mean, Craig Bradley comes to mind with cricket and footy, and no doubt Malcolm, you'd be aware of others. But Bluey, certainly, he's represented South Australia at the highest level in golf, amateur golf, that is. So it's fantastic, and still plays off scratch or roughly around scratch. Yeah. My understanding at Kionga. So great bloke, Bluey, and it's fantastic for South Australia. It's a $200,000 event, so it's good money. The winner gets kind of 18% of that, so you're looking at $36,000. But you will see a good opportunity for the listeners to get down to Wollonga for a day and watch some of Australia's best. Some of the girls that I've caddied for in the past, and that's the other point with it, it's a male and female event. They play off their own tees, but the course is set up so that ideally the boys or the men are hitting an 8-iron into a green, and then the girls should also be hitting an 8-iron into the green. Now, it's a pretty finite art to get that right, and they're always tweaking things, but they're trying to make it as even as possible. Hannah Green, for example, won last year, beat all the boys.
Yep.
and knowing the girls, they love it competing against the guys, and the guys don't like beaten by the girls. So ego comes into it, but no, it'll be fantastic, and it's a good opportunity for anyone to get there and watch. There'll be no, it's free, and be a great event for 4 days.
Is that an event that's sort of come onto the calendar with the popularity of live golf, and golf's a bit more in the spotlight, that some of these tournaments are sort of being fast tracked? Is that sort of how you see it, or is that just me as the regular punter seeing it that way?
No, I think what you'll find is it's all part of the bigger plan in terms of the tier of golf events. You're going to have the worldwide events, which are your $5 to $10 million events, but they're so hard to get into. So the fantastic thing about the PGA of Australasia is they're bringing in the next tier events. So for your emerging stars, the guys who might have status in Asia, or they might be floating in and out of Europe, or even maybe on the smaller tours in the US, they can come back to Australia, and effectively I think we've got about 15 events now on the Australasian calendar between October and March next year. So obviously the two big ones are the Aussie Open and the PGA, but now you've got this next tier event, the TPS series, which my understanding is probably about 5 or 6 now across Victoria, New South Wales. There's one in WA, and now obviously one in South Australia. So you'll get a good quality field. Don't worry. I mean, I've caddied for like Grace Kim. She's won this year on the LPGA Tour. She certainly, if she's in Australia, she would play in those events. Golf is a competitive beast. Yeah, it's nice to win all the millions of dollars, but they also, it's an opportunity for them to catch up with their friends and they room together, and they might hire houses together, and it's the social aspect as well as the competitive stuff. So no, it's just brilliant. And certainly, I know it's been in the works, but to hear the announcement, even I'll be honest, I wasn't aware it was happening. So it was great to read it yesterday.
Mate, we have to ask, the Live Tour and the PGA, is it getting closer to being resolved as part of a one event, or one tour and then the tiers come from there, or is that still a ways off?
No, I think if you read between the lines, and I mean it's changing daily, but I think I mentioned in the last podcast my prediction of being the World Tour. I think that's still on track. There's a lot of not lawsuits, but there's a lot of court cases going on. But all the commentary that you're reading and the things that are happening, it's all part of the bigger plan. There'll still be the day-to-day operations run by the PGA Tour, DP World Tour, Asian Tour, etc. And the Live Tour, I think you'll find that still going to be some rebranding of names. My prediction of the World Tour, whatever they come up with, that'll still go to fruition, and there could be 3 or 4 different events across the world on any given week, and events for the elite, and then the next crop. I think Live is here to stay. I mean, the doomsdayers who think it's a flash in the pan. It's quite interesting to see, particularly the American public, their opinions, but they're in for a rude shock.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, mate, we'll get you out of here on this one. Mate, you've just recently started a new business, and you've got a couple of things in the pipeline. Do you want to share it with our listeners? Give it a bit of a plug?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've obviously always been involved in sport and went to uni when I was a teenager and studied recreation planning and management. So, when I went to America back before COVID, that was part of the plan to sort of get into sports management. And people who know me basically will say, I'm pretty well organised and my background's in operations. So I've just launched a business called Know Me Sports, which is spelled GNOME. So gnome as in garden gnome, but play on words, Know Me Sports. A little bit of play on words, but also the fact I'm vertically challenged, as I always get reminded.
So am I, mate, so it's all good.
Yeah, so I'm standing up for the little fellas. But so just doing some interesting work already with some charities. First event coming up, so walk a mile in my boots with the Hutt Street Centre. I'm going to walk from Port Adelaide to Hutt Street on the 11th of August, wearing nothing but football gear at 5 a.m. So I'm in for a cold walk, but the whole idea is to just get a bit of attention and raise money for a very, very worthy cause, which unfortunately is becoming more and more required with people having tough time. So there's more to come with that. I've got a meeting with Hutt Street this Friday, and looking forward to what comes from that. So to any of your listeners, I've already got the Facebook page, Know Me Sports, and the website and all that to follow. But also organising a big Port Adelaide night down here at the Sailmaster, 31st of August. So to any Port supporters, flick me a private message on Know Me Sports, and I'll make sure you can come along.
Mate, I was going to ask you, but you've already you've told us which footy gear you're going to be wearing. Obviously, the Port Adelaide Power home gear.
Yeah, so I'm planning that week to actually, I mean, that's the big walk, and obviously I don't expect too many people to walk 16 Ks with me at 5 a.m, but we're going to be organising some more get to know me walks is what we're going to call it, and anyone can show up. They're going to have 5 walks throughout that week in various locations across Adelaide. Some will be dog friendly, so you bring your dog along, and for the first 20 people that join me, I'll buy them a coffee. Thanks to some very generous sponsors. And, we'll go for a walk, e.g. like Largs Bay to Semaphore, stop for a coffee, walk back. All up might be about a 4 or 5K walk, but leisurely. I will do Mount Lofty and Morialta and a few others. But, just whole idea is really, it's just interesting. I'm back in the hospitality world, and you just talk to people, and everyone's got a story. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Whether you're talking sport or you're just talking life in general, it's quite interesting. Just ask a few questions to people, and what you find out is amazing. So,
all right, mate. Thanks for joining us once again, and we look forward to obviously keeping track of what you're doing as far as business and charities go. And obviously,
sure.
we'll touch base with you regarding the next round of golf tournaments that are happening around the world.
No worries, and look forward to the sleepless nights and the next few nights with all the sport from Europe. So,
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And go the Aussies. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, mate.
Liking this podcast? Please like, rate, and subscribe. Happy days.
All right, we kick off Happy Days today with happy birthday to Tariq Newchurch, Adelaide Crows, drafted in 2020 from North Adelaide. Has yet to play or register a game in the AFL side, but 5'11" forward, hard for him to break into the Adelaide forward line at the moment. I'm excited to see if and when he does come in, whether he's a bit of a spark.
He may play this week since Rochelle's out, but I've still got big question marks about him defensively, and
I think that's where Adelaide are at the moment as well with him.
Yeah, so let's wait and see. But I think he either plays this week or probably doesn't end up playing an AFL game. So, yeah.
Big call. As I said, I'm excited to see him at the AFL level. Sometimes players can act up or play better at the higher level rather than the SANFL. But like you said, the mail is that sometimes a little bit of his defensive skills.
I've watched enough.
But you trade some of that off for some of his mercurial skills as well. But depends on what Adelaide are looking for, that's for sure.
They keep playing Murphy, and that's the reason he plays. Well,
I think there's a worry there.
Yeah, I think Murphy is ridiculous. Yep. I can't believe it. We'll
talk about that one a little bit later. All right, this week in 1984, tennis, 22nd Federation Women's Tennis in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Czech player Hanna Manlikova and Helena Sukova beat Australia's Elizabeth Sayers and Wendy Turnbull 6-2, 6-2 for a 2-1 victory.
Yeah, so it wasn't really a close match either, was it? Just a bit too good. The old Hannah, she was a very good player, Hannah
Manlikova. Yep. Obviously, the beauty about Fed Cup and Davis Cup and a lot of those sort of tournaments is that you are playing on someone's home soil, even though the players travel around quite a bit. But on this occasion, they were a little too good. All right, we move on. 2012 golf, British Open. We thought we'd bring this one up with Craig obviously being on the show tonight. Men's golf at Royal Latham in St Anne's. South African Ernie Els wins his second claret jug, one stroke ahead of runner-up Adam Scott of Australia. Yeah,
I do remember watching that, obviously barracking for Adam at the end, but Ernie just got over the line. So, very good player, Ernie Els. Pretty well respected, obviously. So
Adam Scott, obviously in form, being runner-up in 2012.
Yeah, so he was around the mark.
like to see him up there again with Cam Smith coming up as well. So fingers crossed. This week in 2019, we talk about money in sport, but the NFL Dallas Cowboys named the most valuable sports team in the world with a worth of $5 billion. MLB New York Yankees sitting in second at $4.6 billion. Rio Madrid sitting in third at $4.2 billion, according to Forbes. This is back in 2019.
Obviously, Debbie does. Dallas was worth billions. Yeah, extraordinary.
Look, the Cowboys team has always been referred to as America's team, so you can see why they are pretty popular. I was actually quite surprised that Rio Madrid, for all of their publicity and population, and everybody loves them, that they're sitting in third spot.
Interesting to know where Man United fit into the equation.
Might have to do a bit more research on for that, and I'll get back to you on that one next week. And to finish us off, considering we're talking cricket as well tonight, that in 2002 it was the last day of first-class cricket for Sir Ian Botham.
Incredible player. Both Ians, Chappell and Botham, don't cover themselves with glory with that 2-year-old crap. Certain blonde-haired Victorian all-rounder who ended up separating them and did play cricket for Woodville. His line to me was they were both carrying on like 2-year-olds and was pathetic. And on that, look, but both are one of the all-time greats. Incredible what he did in 81. Those of us still remember that series.
Yep.
I was only 18 then, and just that's still so vivid.
Yep.
Where someone just came in and won through Brealey's guidance, and both of them won the Ashes single-handedly. It was incredible.
Definitely up there in that Mount Rushmore of players that we talk about. I actually heard that another radio station had used some of our content with that, which was a bit of a feather in the cap. But definitely, as far as cricketers go, he is regarded as one of the all-time greats for sure.
Yes, no, certainly a champion. Did play for Queensland as well. That didn't end gloriously either, but we probably we'll leave that one alone.
We will. All right, let's scoot into the extra time big finish.
Extra time, big finish.
All right, we come back to the AFL reserves comp. We didn't mention it a little bit earlier on. I wanted to leave it till now. Do we see that reserves comp coming in the next 2 to 3 years?
Oh, it's inevitable. I still don't get it that it was going to happen years ago now. I'm trying to remember because that's when Brett Hand was at GWS and it was coming. So, and then COVID obviously occurred. It will happen.
Good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, mixed on it. I think it's just got to happen, though, for the progression of the game.
Where does that leave comps like the SANFL, the Waffle, the VFL?
Oh, look, they're stuck between the Blue Sea as it is. And it was a real worry at Woodville on Saturday that looking around one, I think they declared the crowd at 1,400. I reckon
that's pretty generous.
Yeah, I think they did a Tasmanian counted our heads twice, and the average age there was certainly around my age minimum.
Yep.
So it is. It's
Do state leagues need to get a little bit creative with when and how they're playing these games on the basis that, the AFL is going to have a reserves comp? You can't be competing all the time in those time slots. I mean, you have a look at some of those SANFL games. They're being played when a lot of it's being played.
They've got to do. I think AFLW was ridiculous to change their season.
Yes.
That's when SANFL's got to start.
Yep.
So the big bash after the end of the 872 games each,
yep,
and we're all crying out for something in February, bang, SANFL.
Yep.
And I think, night games at Nord, double headers, I think they've got to think outside the square.
And this is what I'm alluding to.
A lot more proactive. Look, I'm disappointed that the SANFL clubs don't do more. Look, Nordport, Sunday, a couple of weeks ago, why not have made that club day and given a truckload of tickets out to each club in the area? I think these clubs have just got to be better,
And that's part of the reason why I wanted to bring it up, is that if an AFL reserves comp comes in, it is going to be, with teams removed from the Waffle and the SANFL and the VFL, how do they somehow change that. And you're right, they need to be a lot more proactive, and hence the reason why I bring up that. Do they have to change some of these time slots? Do they have
to pie and pasty nights? Try and get the kids along.
Yep.
I think there's a lot more things can be done than what are being done at the
Community
moment.
engagement's huge.
Yep.
All right, the AFLW, you did mention it just then, that the draw has been released, and lo and behold, round number 1, we've got a showdown, Adelaide v Port Adelaide at Nord Oval.
Yeah, I think it's quite sensible. Like, people are saying, why isn't that at Adelaide Oval? Well, you've had the crowds dropping off, the TV ratings dropping off. I think it would have been a big risk. You played that at Adelaide Oval and you get 5,000 or 6,000 there. So you played an empty Adelaide Oval. Well, you play at Nord, it'll be close to a sellout at Nord.
Yep.
Lot better atmosphere. I think that was just a smart decision.
But I think the AFLW product is based around getting back to local suburban clubs, and that has been their strength, and is what has allowed those clubs to thrive with new membership, with people using the facilities, bar takings, canteen takings, membership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I wouldn't be changing lanes if that makes sense. I mean, how good would it be? Yeah, all right, Adelaide don't have a home ground, so to speak, at the moment, and obviously they're trying to work on Thebarton for that. But Nord has been their home game for all of their
Nord and
Unley as well, and some at Glenelg and the occasional one at South Adelaide and so on and so on. But they've made it suburban grounds. In the Victorian sides have generally used Punt Road and down at the Western Bulldogs and Vic Park and so on and so on. So don't change that format just because you've got two teams. Make it an event and a hard ticket to get.
Yeah, and look, I just think the close in at get some atmosphere. And the other thing too, the people who are criticising women's football aren't seeing the overall picture that it's saving community clubs, it's saving country clubs.
Yep.
And that's it's a weird competition because we've had to start at the top and work its way down. Not ideally, of course, it would have been the other way around, but it couldn't be done that way.
The old pyramid scheme.
So I just think it's built too quick. I think they've gone a bit too quick with the teams in, and there's not enough quality. But
unfortunately, the beast started growing pretty quickly, and it grew out of control, and they had to do something to do it. So you're right with adding probably a couple of teams a little bit earlier than they needed to, and then obviously 2 years down the track adding another couple of teams. They're trying to be fair and equitable to every club as well, so totally understand that. But isn't it great that the AFLW is now a massive part of local suburban clubs and also filtering down to junior clubs?
It is. Clubs. I just still think it's lunacy that you start a competition just after your main competition is finished. Now, we don't go to the movies and the movie finish and then sit around and watch cartoons, for a couple of hours. I think it's just so dumb where they move the seasons. I will never understand that.
I'll bring out my restaurant, chefing is that you want to provide the entree to the main course.
Yeah.
And you're right, by having it in that early period in February, January, late January, early February, leading into the season, certainly makes sense that it just sort of whets everybody's appetite that they can go forward with it.
And there's been a fair few of us, Mark Robinson, and that have been saying for ages that that's when the SANFL's got to start. I honestly think Robbo and I first were talking about that nearly 10 years ago now.
Yep.
So,
Interesting. All right, AFL, we have a little bit of fun each week with trade, re-sign and retire. Lockie Neal, Tom Mitchell or Rory Laird?
Well, it's obviously Lockie Neal for the re-sign.
Yes.
The other two, you debate. Look, purely because I don't reckon they're three great choices there, Pete, this week.
Well, but I had to make you think, mate. Come on, I've got to give you something to think about.
Re-sign Rory Laird, retire Tom Mitchell, if I've got to. But
I could have named three players from a bottom team and you'd have said exactly the same thing. So, sorry, Lockie Neal, you're re-signing?
Yes.
And
trading Rory Laird.
Yes.
Which in some ways you could still understand, and retiring Tom Mitchell.
Fair call. Tom Mitchell playing a bit more of a role at Collingwood.
Yeah, he is. No, he's an important player for Collingwood.
Yep.
He's helped their clearance numbers, so he's a vital player at the Pies.
Do you sort of liken him a little bit to what Matty Crouch could do for the Crows? potentially?
I think he could, and I don't get where Adelaide haven't put Laird back to halfback and play Crouch in the middle. But anyway,
They're obviously seeing something, trying something, which is fair enough. Can't disagree with you, mate. That'd probably be my 3 ways of doing it as well. All right, Com Games, huge announcement. Victoria pulling the pin on the Com Games at a little bit of a late stage on the basis that it's going to cost them $7 to $8 billion, which seems ridiculously high.
I think it's a smart decision. You've got to sit there at the moment. I think sport's got to get a bit more intelligent. Instead of this bidding for the Olympics and all that, I think the Olympics, you can argue, do you still have the Com Games? Is it past its use by date as it is? Yep. But have it in one place.
Well, that was going to be my next question, is that could a government here in Australia, considering we probably have the land to do it, compared to some other Commonwealth nations, and the facilities and the infrastructure to be able to do it, does the government go, you know what, we're going to build this facility and make it the home of sport for hockey, the home of sport for swimming, the home of sport for lawn bowls, the home of sport for cycling? You know what I mean? I just see that as a good advantage, but how do you actually do it?
Great by theory.
Yep.
But I think purely have a look at the numbers of cost. You know, with the hospital costs, you know, what, even just South Australia as an example, what we pay for the RAH each day and things like that. Money doesn't actually grow on trees, so I think out of that,
I totally understand that, and I'm probably coming along the point of view of fairy godmother saying, look, if we can put it in one spot and we can pay for it in one spot, or you could potentially, again, thinking outside the square, is that each Commonwealth nation puts in a certain amount of money to have that home stadium, or sorry, not home stadium, that central station where everybody comes every 4 years to participate in those sports.
You can almost argue, and again, it's out of left field, but you could argue that. So does Australia set up a super velodrome?
Yep.
So that the cycling's here. Does Britain set up the big stadium? Or the big swimming centre? So the swimming's there.
Yep.
And the athletics is somewhere else. You know.
Yep.
So
each country has their own specific sport. Yep.
Could you have, therefore, 5 or 6 countries have just that area, and you go for that, and it's called the Com Games altogether, but where it's really individual sports? Maybe that's a way to try and... Otherwise, I do think the costs aren't going down.
No.
And you can virtually see every country going, hang on, one country's pulled out. That's now given us a thing that we can pull out.
Yes.
Can we go, no, it's too expensive? You know, you'd be sitting there at the moment with Brisbane for the 2032 Olympics going, geez, what's the cost going to be here? Could this cripple the state? So maybe they've just got to get smarter.
Yeah, I mean, we know cost of living is a problem.
Yeah.
We know that hospitals are a problem. We know schools are a problem. We know the roads are a problem. They're pothole city. Totally understand from a financial point of view that Melbourne pulling out of it, but I think that the way that they wanted to do it in taking it to the regions was probably where the cost did blow out the most. Yeah,
so theory it seemed all right, but then the cost kept going up and up, and again, likewise with you, we're looking and going, how have we come up with 7 or 8 billion?
Yep.
You know, do we just toss a coin and that's what supposedly it's added up to? Yeah. For me, that still seems obscenely high.
Could it also be a case that Australia then looks at hosting the Commonwealth Games, but they are splitting it up between states? Potentially.
Maybe, and doing it on that basis.
Yes.
Therefore, that event's there.
Yeah.
That's a potential.
Yeah. Peter Malcom came out pretty quickly and said, look, not for us. We've got our eggs in a couple of other baskets. Yeah. I think it's a fair call.
Yep.
All right, mate, like we do each week, or we've started to do each week, the good, the bad, the ugly. You're good for this week?
Oh, gee. Melbourne's comeback in terms of was entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say on the bad, you could argue that it was bad by Brisbane tactically. Ugly. Stuart G, there's going to be no afternoon tea left if he's at the Australian side for the just trying to think with a bit of fun.
No, of course.
Look, I think probably the tennis this week. You've got to go. It was great to see two new champions, male and female.
Yep.
You can argue that's probably the good bit of the week.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'll go along those lines.
Fair call. My good for the week is Australia women retaining the Ashes. Probably fits in a bit with the ugly that, that they weren't convincing with their victory and did play a little bit ugly. I think if you wanted to add another little bit of an ugly fact in there, there's probably the state of some of the local football going around. Hopefully that'll start to improve with the weather starting to improve. And the bad for this week was probably, again, the fact that we're still jumping on who's going to be coaching, who's going to be doing what for coaches, et cetera, et cetera. So very, very important there. Yep. So, that's sort of where we're at with that. All right, mate. As per usual, it's been a huge episode. We will endeavour to do better next time. As per usual, we promise to do better.
No worries.
In this crazy world we live in, we all need the distraction. Enjoying the show? Like, rate, and subscribe. Hook up and connect with us on social media at SportsCast SA. We'll see you next time on Game On.